Your child is alive. How one human earned an alien. Queen's eternal loyalty. Whispers in the wreckage, the ruins of lunar outpost. Epsilon 9 stretched before Captain Nathaniel Drake like a shattered ribcage. Twisted metal. Gleamed under the harsh light of the gas giant that dominated the sky, casting everything in an eerie cobalt glow. His rescue pod had landed 10 kilometers back, and he'd been scanning for life signs ever since. Command, this is Drake. Still, no survivors detected. He adjusted the sensitivity on his bioscanner, unwilling to give up. 6 weeks into the war with the Celestians, and already the death toll numbered in the millions. Captain, your extraction window closes in 40 minutes, Commander Javier's voice crackled through his comm. Weather system approaching. If you're
not airborne by then. Copy that. Drake cut him off, climbing over a collapsed bulkhead. Something about this place felt wrong. The Celestian attack had come 3 months ago, yet the outpost's emergency power cells still functioned in patches. Someone had been here recently. His scanner chirped, registering a faint biological signature beneath a pile of debris. Drake moved carefully, removing pieces of titanium plating until he revealed a small stasis pod, its surface etched with intricate patterns he recognized from intelligence briefings. Celestian royal insignia. "What the hell?" he whispered, wiping grime from the pod's viewport. Inside lay a child, no older than 6 Earth years, skin the color of pale amethyst, with luminescent markings across his forehead, markings that identified him as Prince Orion, heir to the Celestian throne. The boy's chest barely rose with each shallow breath, the stasis field flickering weakly. Drake's mind raced. The prince had been declared dead months ago after a human strike force attacked Queen Meravain's convoy. The loss had transformed the already formidable Celestian monarch into something merciless. Reports claimed she hadn't slept since, pouring her grief into military campaigns that had left human colonies in ruins. "Command, I've found—" Drake hesitated. Protocol demanded he report everything. But he knew what would happen. The child would become a bargaining chip, a hostage, perhaps, even a research subject. Nothing. False reading. Preparing to return to extraction point. Acknowledged. Hurry, Captain. The decision crystallized in his mind. Drake detached the pod's connection to the outpost power and switched it to his suit's emergency reserves. The stasis field stabilized but would only last 18 hours. Enough time, perhaps. "Sorry, Javier," Drake muttered, deactivating his locator beacon. He hefted the pod onto his shoulder and headed not toward his extraction point, but east, toward the neutral trading outpost at Carrick's Drift. From there, he could secure passage across the front lines. The journey was grueling. 3 times he had to hide from patrol drones, once spending 4 precious hours crouched in a radiation-soaked crevasse, using his body to shield the pod. By the time he reached Carrick's Drift, his rations were gone, and his suit power critically low. "I need passage to Celestian space," Drake told a smuggler named Thorn, a 4-armed Ventusian with reputation for taking impossible jobs. "That's suicide, human," Thorn replied, all 4 hands continuing to clean his blaster. "Queen Meravain has ordered all humans shot on sight," Drake revealed the pod. "I have something she wants." Thorn's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The prince died." "Apparently not. Will you take me? It'll cost everything you have, and probably your life." Drake unlatched his service medals, the platinum and gold insignia of 15 years of distinguished service. This should cover it. As Thorn's ship broke atmosphere, Drake sent one final message to Earth Command, his resignation. Whether he survived the next 24 hours or not, Captain Nathaniel Drake of Earth Special Forces no longer existed. The prince stirred in the pod, eyes fluttering open briefly. They were the color of distant nebulae, infinite and ancient despite his youth. "It's okay," Drake whispered. "I'm taking you home." The sovereign's sorrow, The crystal spires of Caelestis Prime pierced the lavender sky like accusing fingers. Thorn's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the outer defense perimeter, immediately surrounded by a dozen Celestian warbirds, their weapon systems tracking the small vessel's every movement. "This is where I drop you," Thorn said, prepping an escape pod. "Royal Guards already hailing us. I told them you're carrying precious cargo for the Queen. They're skeptical but curious enough not to blast us out of existence. Yet." Drake nodded, securing the stasis pod to the escape pod's interior. The prince's condition had deteriorated during their journey. The improvised power source was failing. "If I don't make it through this," Drake said, "find a way to tell Earth. Command what happened, not for me, for the future. Someone needs to know peace was possible." Thorn's expression softened slightly. "Humans. Always thinking you can change the universe with one gesture." He hesitated, then offered one of his 4 hands. "Good luck, Drake." The escape pod jettisoned smoothly, drifting toward the lead warbird. Drake broadcast on all frequencies. "I am unarmed. I carry Prince Orion of House Caelestis, alive but in need of medical attention. I request an audience with Queen Merivane." For 30 agonizing seconds, there was no response. Then a tractor beam locked onto the pod, drawing it into the warbird's docking bay. The moment the pod doors opened, Drake found himself surrounded by royal guards, their crystalline armor gleaming and weapons aimed at his head. Behind them stood Grand Marshal Sora, the Queen's most trusted advisor, her violet eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Show me," she commanded. Drake stepped aside, revealing the stasis pod. Sora approached cautiously, examining the royal insignia before. Peering through the viewport, her composure faltered momentarily. "By the ancient stars," she whispered. She turned to the guards. "Secure the human. Bring the pod directly to the palace, and prepare the royal physicians." The journey to the palace passed in a blur of restraints, armed escorts, and suspicious glares. Drake was marched through corridors of living crystal and luminescent stone, past murals depicting 1,000 years of Caelestian history. Finally, they reached the throne room. Queen Merivane sat like a statue carved from midnight, her obsidian crown casting shadows across features both beautiful and terrible. Gone was the diplomatic leader who had once negotiated trade agreements with Earth colonies. In her place sat a being of cold fury, her grief transmuted into vengeance. "You bring deception into my court, human," she said, her voice like silk over steel. "My son died at human hands. His convoy was attacked. No survivors." Drake met her gaze steadily. "I found him 3 days ago on lunar outpost Epsilon 9, Your Majesty. The stasis pod was hidden beneath debris connected to emergency power. Someone wanted him found eventually." "A trap, then." Her fingers tightened on the throne's armrests. "You believe I would lower my defenses for this charade?" The doors behind Drake opened, and medical attendants rushed in with the stasis pod. The Queen rose, her movements rigid with restraint. She approached slowly, guards flanking her protectively. When she reached the pod, her hand trembled as it hovered over the control panel. The stasis field dissipated with a soft hum. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Prince Orion's eyes fluttered open, focusing first on the ceiling, then on his mother's face. "Mama?" The word was barely audible, a whisper of sound from parched lips. Queen Merivane made a sound unlike anything Drake had ever heard, half gasp, half sob, as she gathered her son into her arms. The court watched in stunned silence as their sovereign, who had not shown emotion since the day war was declared, buried her face in her child's hair and wept openly. Drake stood awkwardly, still flanked by guards, unsure if he would live to see the next hour. Finally, the Queen composed herself enough to speak, though she did not release her son. "You could have used him as leverage," she said, looking at Drake with bewilderment. "Why return him?" "He's a child," Drake replied simply. No child deserves to be a weapon of war. She studied him, centuries of royal inscrutability warring with raw emotion. Your name, human? Captain Nathaniel Drake, Your Majesty. Former Earth. Special Forces. Former. I resigned when I found your son. My government would have seen him as a strategic asset, not a child who needed to go home. The throne room fell silent again, broken only by the prince's soft breathing as he drifted back to sleep in his mother's arms. Captain Drake, Queen Merivane, said finally, by rights of war, I should execute you where you stand. She paused, looking down at her son's face. Instead, I grant you sanctuary within my court, under my personal protection. No harm shall come to you while you remain on Calestis. Prime. Grand Marshal Sora stepped forward. Your Majesty, the treaty prohibits. The treaty is void, the Queen interrupted. It died the day my son was taken. She looked at Drake again, her eyes no longer cold. You have returned my heir when my own forces could not. The debt is considerable. As the royal physicians took Prince Orion to the medical chambers, Queen Merivane approached Drake directly, close enough that he could see the faint luminescence pulsing beneath her skin, the IE mark of ancient Celestian bloodlines. Your child is alive, Drake said softly, echoing the words he'd rehearsed 100 times during his journey. That's all that matters now. For just a moment, something in her expression shifted, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of something unexpected. Perhaps, she replied, equally soft. We shall see what else matters, Captain Drake. Diplomatic shadows. 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo for Drake. His quarters in the eastern wing of the palace were luxurious by any standard, with views of Calestis Prime's twin moons and furnishings that responded to thought rather than touch. Yet he remained effectively a prisoner, albeit a privileged one. Prince Orion had recovered swiftly under the care of royal physicians. The boy had no memory of how he'd ended up in the stasis pod or who had hidden him away. Intelligence suggested a faction within the Calestian military itself might have orchestrated the prince's disappearance, perhaps even Grand Marshal Sora, though proof remained elusive. On the 23rd day of his stay, Drake received a summons to the Queen's private council chamber. Guards escorted him through sections of the palace he hadn't seen before, where the architecture grew increasingly organic, crystal formations giving way to structures that seemed to breathe and pulse with their own rhythm. Queen Merivane waited alone, standing before a holographic display of the contested star systems. Without her formal regalia, she appeared younger, though no less regal. The luminescent markings along her temples pulsed gently, matching the ambient light that seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. Captain Drake, she acknowledged, without turning. What do you see here? Drake studied the display. The Arcturus corridor, the primary conflict zone. And what would Earth's next move be if you were advising your military command? He hesitated, weighing honesty against self-preservation. The beryllium mines on Talax 3, they're vulnerable since you redirected the 7th Fleet to reinforce the Meridian blockade. She turned to face him, one eyebrow raised. You betray your people's strategy so easily? I resigned my commission, Drake reminded her. And besides, it's obvious. Your forces are stretched too thin protecting civilian evacuation routes. Honorable, but strategically unsound. Honor before victory, she quoted. The first principle of Calestian warfare for 12 centuries. A principle that will lose you this war, Drake replied, then added hastily, Your Majesty. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That is why I've summoned you. Since you've delivered my son back to me, I find my appetite for this conflict diminished, yet withdrawal would appear as weakness. You want a way out that saves face, Drake realized. I want a lasting peace, she corrected. One that outlives both of us. Prince Orion will inherit whatever world we create now. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show diplomatic protocols from both civilizations side by side. I propose to name you Special Envoy to the Earth colonies. You would communicate my terms directly to your High Command, with my authority behind you. Drake stared at her, astonished. They'll never accept terms from a defector. They will from the man who found the heir to the Celestian throne. Her eyes met his directly. Unless you prefer to remain here indefinitely? Something in her tone made Drake wonder if the question meant more than it appeared. The way she watched him stirred unexpected warmth in his chest. I accept, he said, on one condition. Any peace must include protections for the border colonies on both sides. No sacrificial territories. She studied him curiously. You continue to surprise me, Captain. Most humans would have demanded personal gain. I didn't return your son for gain, Drake said simply. I did it because it was right. Yes, she murmured. I believe you did. The following days transformed Drake's status entirely. He received diplomatic credentials, access to secure communication channels, and the freedom to move throughout most of the palace. His days were filled with briefings and strategy sessions. His evenings often spent in the Queen's company as they crafted peace proposals that might satisfy both worlds. It was during one such evening, as they worked late into the night in her private study, that Drake began to see beneath Meravain's royal persona. When she spoke of her childhood, of the weight of 1,000 generations of rulers that had shaped her from birth, her voice softened. When she described her hopes for her son's future, passion animated her features. He asks about you, she said, unexpectedly, setting aside a diplomatic brief. Orion, he calls you the Starman. Drake smiled. Smart kid. Has he recovered his memories? Not yet. Perhaps never. She rose and moved to a sideboard, returning with 2 glasses of luminescent, azure liquid, starfall nectar, a Celestian delicacy. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the glass, sending an unmistakable current between them. Drake took a careful sip, the liquid warming his throat and sharpening his senses. In another life, Meravain said quietly, had we met as simply man and woman, not as enemies across a battlefield. She didn't finish the thought, but her eyes held his, and Drake found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than protocol or caution. A sharp chime interrupted the moment. Grand Marshal Sora's holographic form materialized in the center of the room. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, she said, her gaze flickering coolly to Drake. Lord Vexrin has returned from the outer colonies. He demands audience regarding the unusual presence in your court. Meravain's expression hardened instantly back into the Queen's mask. Inform Lord Vexrin I will receive him tomorrow. After Sora's image faded, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Lord Vexrin leads the war faction in your court, Drake said. It wasn't a question. He was once betrothed to me before I chose to rule alone. Meravain set down her glass. He will not approve of our peace initiatives, nor of you. Is that a problem? Her eyes met his again, something unspoken passing between them. It will be, Captain Drake, for both of us. As Drake returned to his quarters that night, he realized 2 critical things. Peace between their worlds might actually be possible, and his feelings for Queen Meravain had become far more complicated than he'd ever anticipated. The challenge of Crown's Lord Vexrin commanded attention merely by existing. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with broad shoulders and skin the deep indigo of Caelestian nobility, he moved through the great hall with the confidence of one born to power. The ceremonial armor he wore, despite this being a diplomatic gathering, gleamed, with the insignia of 30 victorious campaigns against human forces. Drake watched from his position near the Queen's smaller second throne, where she had deliberately placed him as a statement. Prince Orion sat at his mother's right hand, occasionally glancing at Drake with undisguised curiosity and something like admiration. "Your Majesty," Lord Vexrin bowed precisely the minimum depth required by protocol. "I return bearing news of glorious victories in the Denali sector. 3 human outposts have fallen. Their resources now fuel our war effort." Murmurs of approval rippled through the gathered nobles and military officers. Drake maintained a neutral expression, despite the tightness in his chest. Those outposts had been primarily scientific research stations, minimally defended. "Queen," Merryvane's voice cut through the murmurs. "Those victories came at what cost, Lord Vexrin?" "Cost, Your Majesty." Vexrin's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Caelestian lives, ships, resources that could have been directed toward rebuilding, colonies damaged in human counterattacks." Vexrin's eyes narrowed, then shifted deliberately toward Drake. "I see the human defector has poisoned Your Majesty's resolve. Perhaps your gratitude for one small service has clouded your judgment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Queen's luminescent markings pulsed more rapidly, a sign of strong emotion, Drake had learned. "You question my clarity of thought, Lord Vexrin." Her voice remained measured, but with an edge that made several courtiers step back. "I question the wisdom of entertaining peace overtures while we hold the advantage," Vexrin replied smoothly. "And I question the unprecedented position you've granted this human within your court." He turned to face Drake directly. "Tell me, Captain, what did you do with the tracking device from Prince Orion's stasis pod, the one that would have signaled his location to our search parties?" A hushed silence fell over the assembly. Drake felt dozens of eyes turn toward him. "There was no tracking device when I found the pod," he answered truthfully. "Convenient," Vexrin smiled coldly. "Perhaps because you or your compatriots removed it before your heroic discovery." Drake understood immediately. Vexrin was suggesting that humans had orchestrated the entire scenario: the prince's disappearance, his discovery, and Drake's subsequent integration into the Caelestian court. Before Drake could respond, Prince Orion stood, his small form somehow commanding attention despite his youth. "The Starman saved me," he said, his clear voice carrying through the hall. "I remember now. The bad ones who took me, they weren't humans. They spoke our language." Vexrin's composure faltered momentarily. "Your Highness, your ordeal was traumatic. Memory can be unreliable." "I remember your voice," Orion continued, staring directly at Vexrin. "You came to my chambers before the attack. You said it was necessary sacrifice for greater victory." The great hall erupted in shocked whispers. Queen Merryvane rose, her expression terrible in its restraint. "Guards," she said quietly, "secure Lord Vexrin." "This is absurd!" Vexrin's hand moved to his ceremonial blade. "The word of a confused child against a lord of the High Council. I demand the right of challenge." An ancient tradition, Drake knew. Trial by combat when a noble stood accused. "Your right is acknowledged," the Queen said coldly. "Name your champion." Vexrin's smile returned. As accuser, Prince Orion must be represented by his closest defender. His gaze shifted to Drake, the human who claims to have saved him. It was a perfect trap. As an outsider, Drake had no standing to participate in the challenge ritual. To refuse would undermine everything he and the Queen had built toward peace. To accept would likely mean his death against a Caelestian warrior. "I accept," Drake said, before the Queen could intervene. "On one condition: no blades, no energy weapons. Hand-to-hand combat only." Vexrin looked momentarily surprised, then laughed. "Caelestian strength exceeds human capability by a factor of 3. You choose certain defeat." "Perhaps," Drake smiled thinly. "But I've spent 3 weeks studying your culture, Lord Vexrin. Have you spent even 3 minutes understanding mine?" The combat arena was ancient, carved from a single massive crystal, and surrounded by tiered seating that now overflowed with spectators. Drake stood in simple attire, loose black pants and no shirt, revealing the scars of 15 years of military service. Across from him, Vexrin had discarded his ornate armor for a traditional combat suit that nonetheless emphasized his superior size and strength. "The challenge is to submission or incapacitation," Grand Marshal Sora announced. "Death is not required, nor encouraged." She gave Drake a look that might have held a hint of concern before stepping back. Vexrin attacked immediately, crossing the space between them with surprising speed. His first blow would have shattered Drake's ribs had it connected. But Drake wasn't there. He'd already dropped and rolled, using the Calestian's momentum against him. What followed was not the quick execution Vexrin had expected, but a grueling test of endurance. For every powerful strike Vexrin launched, Drake countered with precision and economy of movement. Earth Special Forces training emphasized fighting superior opponents, aliens whose physical capabilities exceeded human limits. Minutes stretched into a quarter hour. Vexrin's frustration grew visible as his breath came in heavy gasps. Drake was tiring too, but he'd been pacing himself, waiting for the opening he needed. It came when Vexrin, enraged by a particularly humiliating evasion, overextended on a lunging strike. Drake stepped inside his guard, executed a complex joint lock he'd adapted for Calestian physiology, and used Vexrin's own weight to drive him to the ground. The sound of Vexrin's arm breaking echoed through the suddenly silent arena. "Yield," Drake gasped, maintaining pressure on the shattered joint. "Never to a human," Vexrin snarled through clenched teeth. Drake leaned closer, his voice for Vexrin alone. "I know you weren't working alone. Yield now, and perhaps the Queen will show mercy to your co-conspirators." Fear flickered in Vexrin's eyes. "Yield," he managed finally. As Drake released him and stepped back, the arena erupted in astonished exclamations. Queen Merivane's expression revealed nothing, but Prince Orion was bouncing with undisguised excitement. Later, as royal physicians treated the worst of Drake's injuries, the Queen entered his chambers alone, dismissing the attendants. "You risked everything," she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Why?" Drake winced as he sat up straighter. Peace was always going to require risk, and Vexrin's conspiracy needed to be exposed. His confession has implicated others. "A faction that believed war with humanity would strengthen our genetic line." She moved closer, examining a bruise along his temple with cool fingers. "They saw Orion as too sympathetic to human culture, too soft." "Nothing soft about that kid," Drake said, smiling despite his split lip. "He saved my life today. You saved each other." Her fingers lingered against his skin. "The Council has voted unanimously to ratify our peace proposal. Diplomatic channels will open within days." "That's incredible news," Drake said, genuinely stunned. "There is one complication." Merivane's eyes held his. "The peace treaty includes provisions for cultural exchange, ambassadorial presence, trade negotiations, but not for a human to remain in the royal court," Drake finished for her, understanding dawning. "I'll be expected to return to Earth." "Yes," she said simply. "Unless..." She didn't finish, but the question hung between them, charged with possibility. Stars. Align, the Grand Assembly Hall of Caelestis Prime had never hosted a human delegation before. Elaborate accommodations had been made, adjusted atmospheric composition, gravity calibration, even specialized acoustic panels to make human speech patterns more easily understood by Caelestian ears. Drake stood apart from both groups, occupying the uncertain territory between worlds. 6 months had passed since he'd found Prince Orion, 5 since Lord Vexrin's failed challenge. The peace process had progressed with surprising speed, driven by war weariness on both sides and the compelling narrative of Drake's unlikely role in it all. "The signing ceremony will begin shortly," Grand Marshal Sora informed him, her former hostility replaced by grudging respect. Your presence is requested at the central dais. Not my signing ceremony, Drake reminded her. I'm just a witness. Are you? She gave him an inscrutable look. The Queen requests your company in her antechamber first, immediately. Drake found Queen Merivane standing before a window that overlooked the capital city, resplendent in formal regalia that merged traditional Caelestian design with subtle nods to human aesthetic sensibilities, a diplomatic statement woven into fabric and crystal. You've been avoiding me, she said without turning. I've been giving you space to lead. Drake corrected gently. This treaty is your legacy. Our legacy. Now she faced him, and the raw emotion in her expression caught him off guard. You never answered my question, that night after the challenge. Drake stepped closer. You never finished asking it. A faint smile touched her lips. Such a human response. Always requiring explicit words for what should be understood in silence. Merivane. He rarely used her name without title, and it hung in the air between them, intimate and charged. After today, I have no official reason to remain on Calestis, Prime. And if I were to provide one? Her voice had softened, the Queen momentarily set aside for the woman. What reason would satisfy your counsel? Your people, Drake asked. I'm still human, still an outsider. Are you? She moved toward him, close enough that he could see the faint pulse of light beneath her skin, faster now. The man who returned my son, who exposed a conspiracy that would have prolonged a senseless war, who fought for peace when others demanded vengeance. Her hand rose to touch his face, tracing a scar along his jawline. Perhaps you understand Calestian values better than many born to them. Drake covered her hand with his own. I've spent 6 months learning to navigate your world, Merivane, but I don't belong to it. Then perhaps it is time you did. Her eyes held his, unwavering. There is an ancient provision in Calestian law. A monarch may elevate an outsider to noble status through the rite of celestial bonding. Drake's breath caught. That sounds suspiciously like marriage, she confirmed, a hint of amusement in her eyes at his surprise. Though more accurately, a permanent alignment of souls and purpose. You're proposing, Drake said incredulously. I am stating a possibility, she corrected, royal dignity reasserting itself. One that would satisfy law and tradition while allowing you to remain by my side, and Orion's. He has come to see you as a father figure, you know. The weight of what she offered settled over Drake. Not just personal connection, but responsibility for an entire civilization. The chance to truly build the peace from within, to help guide Orion toward a future where humans and Calestians could coexist, and beneath it all, the undeniable truth that he had fallen in love with her, gradually, against all reason and protocol. Your council will object, he said, but his tone had shifted, the objection perfunctory. They will adapt. Her confidence was absolute. As will your people. Drake took her hands in his, a gesture that would have been scandalous in public. Ask me properly, Your Majesty. No diplomatic language, no royal decrees, just us. Something. In her expression softened completely then, vulnerability replacing composure. Stay with me, Nathaniel, she said simply. Be my consort, my advisor, my equal. Help me raise my son to understand both our worlds. Help me build something that will outlast us. He drew her closer, protocol forgotten. Yes, he whispered against her temple. To all of it, yes. Their first kiss was hesitant, bridging differences in physiology and culture, then deepening with shared understanding. When they finally separated, both were slightly breathless. The treaty signing, Drake remembered suddenly. Merivane smiled, her composure returning though her eyes remained bright. It will now include an unexpected addendum. The announcement that followed the treaty signing sent shockwaves through both delegations. Human diplomats exchanged astonished glances. Celestian nobles murmured in disbelief, but Prince Orion's delighted laugh cut through the tension, his small hand reaching out to grasp Drake's. "I told you he would stay," the boy announced to the assembly, with the unassailable confidence of childhood. The stars aligned to bring him to us. Later, as celebration enveloped the capital city, Drake and Merivane stood on a private balcony overlooking the festivities. Fireworks bloomed in patterns representing both Earth and Celestian constellations, merging in the night sky. "Was this your plan all along?" Drake asked, his arm around her waist. "From the moment I returned, Orion?" "I had no plan beyond vengeance until you spoke those words," she admitted. "Your child is alive. In that moment, you reminded me that life should triumph over death, love over hatred." She turned in his embrace to face him. The rest unfolded, as it was meant to. "Fate?" he teased gently, still learning the boundaries of how to speak to someone who was both his queen and his future wife. "Choice," she corrected. "1,000 choices by both of us, leading here." Her fingers traced the ceremonial markings that had been applied to his temples for the announcement, temporary versions of the luminescent patterns that would become permanent during the bonding ceremony. And now, 1,000 more choices ahead, together. As they sealed this promise with another kiss, the twin moons of Calestis Prime rose fully above the horizon, bathing them in silver light. Below, humans and Celestians celebrated side by side, the first night of a peace built not on political expedience, but on the simplest and most powerful force in any universe, the courage to choose compassion when vengeance would have been easier. And in the royal quarters, Prince Orion slept peacefully, dreaming of stars that crossed vast distances to find each other, just as his new family had done.